Election day is over. Election week continues because the race for Aurora mayor is now too close to call. Sure didn't look that way on election night. But the lead for Republican former Congressman Mike Coffman has gotten smaller and smaller. Democrat Omar Montgomery would become the first Democrat elected mayor of Colorado's third largest city in decades. And this race keeps getting closer. Coffman's lead has now shrunk to 273 votes. Election night ended with Coffman up 7%. His lead is now 0.4%, up 35.8 over 35.4% for Omar Montgomery. This would be the biggest upset of the 2019 election cycle in Colorado if Montgomery can close the gap. I talked with Coffman on the phone tonight. He says that he does not believe that his shrinking lead is the result of any kind of fraud or funny business. But Coffman says he's frustrated with the Arapahoe County clerk for running what he called a disorganized ballot count and criticized her as partisan. Our Steve Steger talked with the clerk at the center of Colorado's biggest undecided race.
My team is dedicated to making sure your vote counts. It's important, and vote early, otherwise this is what we run into.
It wasn't the suggestion to vote early, but to vote often that led Republicans to criticize Democratic Arapahoe County Clerk Joan Lopez earlier this year. That phrase was included in this flyer, which Lopez says her office removed and corrected.
It's an old 1920s phrase. I had to look it up to even know what that meant.
We asked Lopez, who's overseeing her first election as clerk, a standard question we ask when votes are being counted in a close race. Can you assure the public that you're handling the election fairly?
I think it is very partisan right now as far as the political climate. I don't know how to answer that.
After some coaching from her spokeswoman, Lopez explained she gives tours to show off the process in which bipartisan teams pick up, open, count, and tabulate ballots.
There's lots of steps that it goes through. There's cameras, there's poll watchers. We're dedicated to having a fair and clean process.
Republicans have questioned whether Clerk Lopez accepted ballots after the deadline. Poll watchers asked to see the chain of custody for late ballots and were told to file an open records request. They have done that, and we have asked to see those same documents, Kyle.
273 vote margin. That's about double what would prompt an automatic recount, but now begins what's called the curing process. It's like a chase for uncounted votes.
So in this curing process, there's a week to see if there's a problem with a signature. They have a week to sort it out. So the clerk will contact you if there's a problem with your signature. And the campaigns also get databases of the voters where there's a problem with their signature. They don't know how they voted.
Yeah.
But they also get those, so you can expect if you have a problem with your signature, you're going to hear from the clerk and likely going to hear from one of these two campaigns.
All right, Steve, thank you. We continue to watch Aurora. Colorado's Independent Ethics Commission is out with its report finding that former Governor Hickenlooper was jetted around America and the world by wealthy interests. Now, the report does not take a position on whether Hickenlooper did anything wrong. That comes later in the process. One thing to watch is the travel paid for by a Colorado company which would not tell ethics investigators whether it had state business that could create an ethical conflict. The state's Ethics Commission is looking at who paid for former Governor Hickenlooper to travel around America and to the Bilderberg gathering of global elites in Italy. So now, one example. Hickenlooper was flown to Connecticut by MDC Holdings. That's Richmond American, the home builder, owned by a friend and donor of Hickenlooper's. The former governor says he tried to pay for the flight, but the company refused. And speaking of refused, the company would not tell ethics investigators whether it had any business before the state, which could have created a conflict of interest. As for the secretive Bilderberg, where journalists are kept out in the streets along with protesters, Hickenlooper says he paid his own way to that conference where future presidential candidates hobnob with global elites. A Bilderberg rep insisted Hickenlooper was not invited because he was a governor, but instead because he was, quote, an interesting American person. Former Governor Hickenlooper abandoned his failed presidential run to join the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate earlier this year. I sent a list of our questions about the ethics findings to his spokeswoman today. we have not received any answers. Vote counting is over in Denver, and that confirms that union-backed candidates have swept the races to take control of the school board. First time that's happened in decades. District 5 was the closest race, and unofficial results from the elections office show Brad Larvick winning District 5 with 35% of the vote. Julie Banuelos was close behind with 34% of the vote, only a 300 vote difference. Again, not enough to trigger an automatic recount, so she'd have to pay for one. As we mentioned in the Aurora mayoral race, the campaigns are now working on curing ballots, looking for ones with signature issues. The Banuelos campaign is looking for volunteers to help with that. And as Steve alluded to, if you're a campaign, you don't know whether the voter with the bad ballot picked you, so you may be helping to get a vote for your opponent if you fix it. Tonight, a story you have not heard yet about the report on 43 Catholic priests accused of sexually abusing kids in Colorado. Because when that report came out, the frenzy of media attention largely focused on 3 men. The Attorney General who announced the findings, the investigator behind the report, and the Archbishop who refused to answer our questions about it. Well, tonight, we introduce you to 3 women. Without them, that landmark investigation of priest abuse would not have happened. They talked with our Anusha Roy.
The call started after a report in Pennsylvania where priests in the Catholic Church were accused of sexually abusing kids.
A couple of these gentlemen are now in their 70s and 80s and have said it was so hard for us to approach this, to acknowledge that the church that we loved was potentially covering up abuse that we had suffered.
It was August 2018. Cynthia Kaufman had roughly 4 months left as the state's Attorney General when victims asked her to investigate the Catholic Church.
Did you ever feel like it was you and your team, 3 women, taking on the Catholic Church?
Yes, it did feel that way at times.
She's talking about her former chief of staff and chief deputy who think about it differently. They were just as motivated to move fast and could only do so because of collaboration with the church.
Even if we only had 4 months, we had to get something done for these survivors.
We began together a process of brainstorming what we could do together, mindful of some of the challenges, but still they came to the table and willing to participate.
They said, you know, we believe that there have been no instances of abuse in the Colorado Catholic Church since at least 1998. My reaction was, that's terrific news. If that is in fact the case, let's sit down and talk about that.
It was these women who ultimately laid the groundwork for the investigation before passing the baton to a new Attorney General. They are proud of the work they did.
I consider it a first chapter.
But Kaufman said with limited time meant limited scope.
We were not able to include priests who were seminarians at the time of an allegation of abuse. We were not able to include religious order priests.
The report said most of the abuse was in the 60s and 70s and ultimately named 43 priests. Kaufman says she's still hoping for more answers.
Who thought it was more important to protect the priesthood and the church than it was to protect child victims?
That independent investigation came up with some recommendations for the church, and the church today said that they're going to be following through with all of that and that they're going to have a plan by the end of the year that includes improving how the church is working with victims who may be coming forward decades later. And the church also said, though, Kyle, that they're going to be checking in with the Attorney General and the independent investigator as well about the changes that they're going to be making.
And when we look back at the calculations and the wrangling done by former AG Kaufman setting up this investigation, it was right down to where the dollars would come from to fund it.
Yeah, so that investigation was supposed to be paid for half by the state, half by the church. But Kaufman became a little bit worried that if public dollars were involved, people like the media could file an open records request and potentially get the names of victims. She didn't even want to run that risk. So she ended up going and getting private donors to come up with $150,000, she says, to help protect the identity of the people who came forward.
No honest media outlet would run the name of the
Exactly.
victim without checking with them first, but she didn't want that to be even a possibility.
Not even an option.
All right. Thank you, Nusha.
Colfax runs a long way, and it's come a long way.
That's crazy, even to see the Bluebird, the sign, and how beat up it was.
On this Throwback Thursday, we revisit a 25-year-old 9 News documentary, and the Bluebird Theater.
It looks a lot better than what it did. I'm so happy that it's no longer a porn theater.
And I have to wonder how many people have walked through the doors of a hospital in town never knowing it was named for a high school dropout who became a decorated battle tank commander. That's next.
Turned out to be a pretty nice day once the fog burned off, and now a clear, cold night in Denver. Our high today below average, as you might expect, in the upper 40s. We are going the other direction for the next 48 hours. Matter of fact, we're going to come close to 70 degrees, and then we have another chance for snow. Already down to 36 at the airport, wind chill of 30. Winds light out of the north, driving that front to the south, where it's interacting with some moisture, and we're looking at some heavy rain showers from Dallas and Houston up to Atlanta and Washington, where airport delays are a good bet. That cold air pushes into the southern plain states. That's areas east of us. For Colorado and points westward, a warming and drying trend with a storm track to the north of us. I think you're going to like the extended forecast. Let's start with tonight. Clear, cold, 31. Tomorrow, hey, it's Friday. Congratulations. Just about made it through the week with highs above average, and it gets better for Saturday. 70 ahead of a storm that may bring a wintry mix Sunday night into Monday. Cold start to the week, and then temperatures rebounding back to the mid-50s by the middle of next week.
This Throwback Thursday, we look at the transformation of Colfax Avenue over the last 25 years, where seediness grew into an established business district around the Bluebird Theater.
It's all good. We're chilling. Yeah, like you're acting really touristy. Like, oh my God, Colfax.
1994, I was just coming into existence. I was born February 1994, so.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
I like the hairstyles and the outfits.
In the 1930s, kids flocked to the Bluebird Theater on Colfax to see the Westerns.
Look at that sign.
Then it became a porn theater, then an empty building. Now, with the help of city incentives, it's being restored.
It's crazy, man, to see how far Colfax has come along, being a Denver native, even to see the Bluebird, the sign, and how beat up it was, and the fixing up that they did to that place inside. It looks a lot better than what it did. I'm so happy that it's no longer a porn theater.
There's actual windows. Now it's like a cool little spot for music venues.
And now to think that it's labeled as the Bluebird District, a lot of people come in here and they ask, like, oh, what area are we in? And it's cool to be able to say, oh, this is the Bluebird District. This whole area, man, has just come such a long way. Thinking back to even when I was a kid, you know, Colfax was necessarily not really an area in which you just wanted to hang out on, because we knew what was going on Colfax, so we wanted to stay so far away from this street. It had character then, and it will always have character here on Colfax, but it's great to really see how far along this area has come.
Colfax,
9 News produced the documentary on Colfax in 1994. There is a link to watch the whole thing with the incomparable Gary Shapiro in the next section on 9news.com. One more throwback we want to mention on this Thursday. 50 years ago today, November 6, 1969, voters renamed what was Jefferson City. The Jefferson City Sentinel shouted, "We will be Lakewood." The question wasn't on any ballot. It was a separate write-in poll that attracted nearly 12,000 voters, and nearly all of them chose Lakewood. Only 2,000 people wanted to keep the name Jefferson City.
A high school dropout, a decorated veteran. I guarantee you know the name, but probably don't know the story.
Here is somebody that was a part of the Denver Jewish community. He was a war hero.
And it's a sign that proximity matters. Because what would you do on a bathroom patio? That's next.
You just feel sorry for the poor polar bear that used to live at the Denver Zoo. They moved Cranberry cross-country trying to get her to breed. and now her mate died. Louie died at the Alaska Zoo, so Cranberry is alone up there. Zookeepers don't know if she's pregnant. Remember how we told you with polar bears, they often don't know until they're in labor. They didn't see any, how shall we say it, breeding behavior, but they've moved her to a maternity area for monitoring. The Alaska Zoo is going to see about getting a new male up there next year. When you think about famous generals from World War II, it's likely names like Patton, Eisenhower, MacArthur, Bradley. Our Noel Brennan explains why Colorado should know Rose.
This is a big deal now that he's a colonel. And sometimes great people get lost in history. And Rose was one of them.
History you've likely never heard.
It took me 6 years to write the book.
Marshall Fogel will try to condense.
You never know when to stop.
It starts with Major General Maurice Rose.
This scrapbook is from the Rose family.
The dropout from East High School,
which makes the story even greater.
Became the most decorated battle tank commander ever.
He knew what he was doing.
And highest ranking Jewish soldier in World War II.
And this is what Eisenhower said about Rose. He was not only one of our bravest and best, but was a leader who inspired his men to speedy accomplishments. He was out in front of his division, leading it in one of its many famous actions when he met his death.
March 30th, 1945. German tanks cornered Rose, and he was shot. A nation mourned, but a legacy was largely forgotten.
And you don't ever hear about Maurice Rose.
His name has been hiding in plain sight.
We're celebrating our 70th anniversary of Rose Medical Center.
The hospital opened in 1949, thanks to donations from 10,000 soldiers who fought under Major General Maurice Rose.
General Eisenhower came here.
Ike even laid the cornerstone.
He was a war hero, and this was a way for the community to honor him in 1949.
He's commanding 16,000 people.
An anniversary is a good reason to retell his story. History should remember it.
It's a great reminder of how important it is to honor our veterans. That's what I hope comes out of it.
For Next, I'm Noel Brennan.
A few minutes ago, Rose Medical Center unveiled a restored portrait of General Rose. If you ever happen to be pushing your wife in the lobby to have a baby upstairs, you'll glimpse the portrait off to the left. We return with a sign that proves the last thing you ever want to be confused about is the location of the bathroom. Next. It's a sign that there are worse things you can do with a patio than take photos of your snowy patio furniture on it. Our viewer Steve spotted what appears to be a patio bathroom at the Broadway Market in Denver. That is not a breezy place to relieve yourself in full view of everyone. I think it's just two separate signs that are placed too close together. It's confusing. If you see a sign that makes you do a double take, share it with us. Email next@9news.com or tweet it with the hashtag HeyNext. Both Karen and Daniel write in with feedback tonight, wondering if there's going to be a runoff in Aurora because neither candidate reached 50% of the vote. Absolutely not. It will be whoever has the higher vote count in the end. Hey, and just a reminder, normally during football season, you see me on the air Sundays, but not here on Fridays. I will be here tomorrow night on Friday. I expect you will be too. See you next time.